Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Armada and the upcoming 200-point format that's going to be arriving with Rebellion in the Rim. Now, 200 points is how this campaign that's coming out is going to be kind of operating, but it's also going to introduce like that alternate 200-point format for people to play at. And while there isn't a lot of information known, I think simply by knowing that there's a 200-point format on a 3x3 board is going to tell us an awful lot of how impacts might be felt, and I'm going to be talking about that today. That being said, I also want to remind you guys there is a new round of the giveaway. If you'd like to win a $25 Amazon gift card, all you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. In this case, just tell me what you are looking forward to most for Star Wars Armada coming up, hopefully this year. Hopefully there aren't too many delays and push all the stuff that we're excited for back to next year. Because there is a lot of stuff on our plate right now. We've got the Super Star Destroyer coming. We've got Rebellion in the Rim coming. We've got 2 more ships coming that are supposed to be out by the end of the year. And we've got Clone Wars, which won't be out until next year. But that's very, very cool. It's a very exciting time to be an Armada player. And if you're thinking about joining, it's a great time to get in. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about this 200-point format. The first thing that I want to talk about, I think it's going to be a great entry-level format for newer players coming into the game because it's going to be smaller, it's going to be less. I don't think it's going to overwhelm people as much, and I think that's an important thing because this game is a little bit complex on the surface. When you're first getting into it, it can seem a little rules-heavy, and so I think having a smaller subset is a lot easier. There's a reason that at conventions and stuff, when we give demos of this game, we go with a smaller force. We don't go with a full-blown 800-point list. You know, there's a reason why the core set, you know, starts you off with 1 ship, which, I mean, it's not a good thing, but if you're just teaching somebody the basic rules, if you're just kind of getting started, I mean, the core set's even less than a 200-point game. But there's a reason why, you teach somebody on a smaller subset before you move on to the full game. So I think 200 points is a good way to have that entry-level game that's going to be a little bit less complex. It's going to be a little bit smaller and less overwhelming for new players. Another good thing is it's going to be cheaper for new players to get into. Like, that's one of the main problems right now. Because the core set is so expensive, people think, oh, I have to get all these other ships. I need to build up to 800 points. The core set doesn't even get me halfway there. So, and the core set does get you kind of close. So the core set plus 1 more ship will probably get you there. So there is that. But at the same time, it can be expensive to get into the full game. So I think this is great for a lot of people who are on a budget that still want to be able to play the game, but their budget is constraining them. This will get them close of the way there, halfway there, and and it's a great start. And then once you get a couple of different fleets of the 200-point format, then maybe you'll look into playing the larger game. And that's kind of something that Kill Team has done for 40K. It gets you like these smaller battles. And hopefully this becomes a trend in a lot of other games. Well, I don't think it needs to be necessarily a thing in X-Wing, because X-Wing has smaller games to begin with. But something like Legion is kind of in the same ballpark. I think could also benefit from some type of really micro, and that would work well for multiplayer too. And I think that's another thing that is kind of a possibility here, depending on the future of the 200-point format. Is how could this impact multiplayer and have true like free-for-all scenarios on larger maps with everybody building a 200-point force. So next up, let's talk about the smaller table size, your smaller footprint for the game. This is a big deal because a lot of stores have a problem trying to get a 6x3 tournament going, whereas they need like 20 or 40 different tables that are all 6x3 as opposed to 3x3. It's literally twice as difficult. It's actually more than twice as difficult because there's a lot of tables that can fit a 3x3 just fine, but don't fit a 6x3. This also is a big deal for a lot of you that want to play this at home. A lot of kitchen tables, even kind of semi-larger kitchen tables, can fit a 3x3 just fine, but cannot fit a 6x3. And that's one of the reasons why I had to order a special gaming table. I made a whole table topper for my current table. I can play X-Wing on it, no problem, but trying to play Armada does become a little bit difficult. Commanders. This is the next thing I want to talk about. Are we even going to see commanders in a 200-point format? I don't think so. Now, they haven't said this yet, but I would expect commanders will not be an option. I know some of you that I've talked to have said, well, maybe you'll be allowed to take commanders. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't see that being something where one person has a commander and the other person doesn't. I think it's going to be a yes or no thing. Like, you have to take commanders or you can't take commanders. That's what I would predict based on the way a lot of other games tend to work. And so I think you won't have any commanders in a 200-point format. Also, that kind of fits in line with the fact that it's a simpler, more slimmed down game. You don't want to overwhelm people with, and you also have to worry about what your commander does for your whole fleet every turn. I think you want to keep it simple, and this is just makes it for a great way to demo the game and teach. A lot of times when I do demos, I don't use commanders. I'll explain to them what commanders are and that your commander's ship is going to be your flagship, but I usually don't actually have the commander's abilities. Like, if I'm teaching somebody for the first time, I don't usually put Tarkin's token on everybody, because a lot of times Tarkin is the demo commander. And then also some of the commanders are just not going to really have much of a value, because commanders are built and designed for the 800-point format, and so they might not even be very valuable. There's some that might be. Some might feel broken compared to others in this format too. So it might just be simpler just to say no commanders. And I'm going to do the same thing with objectives. I'm going to think that, similar. There probably won't be objectives, just because objectives are built for that format, for that 800-point format. 15 points in a 200-point format is going to be twice as devastating than it is in an 800-point format. And also, alternatively, if you're playing a 1600-point game, all of a sudden, those points probably don't matter nearly as much. So objectives work best for the format that they were designed for. Now, there could be, and again, there's also some objectives that are just kind of universal, like superior positions or something like that. And I can see those maybe being valuable, but there may be specific 200-point objectives. Like, I could even see them designing like one of each, and those are just the static objectives you always use for a 200-point game. I could see something like that being something that comes out eventually, but that's really just a big guess. I'm leaning towards they would go with the alternate, because they already have a format if you're not using objectives, and it's where you alternate who's first player, all right? And whoever wins the bid gets to choose if they want to be first player first turn or second turn. So you'll be able to alternate first player this turn, then you get first player next turn, then I'll get first player the following turn, so on and so forth. And I think that already works well enough for a smaller game, and we've used that for larger games, certainly, but I think that's kind of the best way to go. So, and then there's also the question of large ships. Large ships may not be legal in a 200-point format. I'm not certain on this one. Like, some of the other ones I feel more confident about saying, but this one's a big maybe for me. I think even if they are legal, I don't think they'll be that common. But one of the problems with large ships is, is the balance. There are certain builds for a Simoon, for example, where it could be really broken compared to like a couple of small ships coming in, and especially if it has things like gunnery teams and spinal armament and stuff to reroll, and like there's just there's a lot of ways where this you could potentially just not be killable with a large ship, and I think that definitely constitutes a problem. You obviously won't be able to fit huge ships in a 200-point format. Well, at least any huge ships that we can conceive of. There may be a huge ship that is exactly 200 points that maybe you can't fit, and I don't think that would be fair either. But that's the problem, is like large ships have a lot of resilience, and over a 6-turn game, it's one thing to have 800 points of ships that are potentially bringing their guns all on your large ship, but when you've only got half of that, and a large ship can usually kill one small ship or two small ships if they put their mind to it without a whole lot of difficulty. And so in a 200-point game, they do that. You're just not going to have enough guns left to shoot back at them to bring down a large ship. So I would expect that large ships don't see play in 200-point games, whether it becomes the actual rule or it just becomes more of an agreement among players, like a sporting kind of thing, because it feels like most of the time that would just not be fun. And that's, I think, one of the things that the 200-point format is supposed to do. You do have medium ships, and hopefully we'll get more medium ships in the future, which can kind of fill that role without being quite as devastating as the large ships are. So that's a possibility as well. We might just see more medium ships start to show up and on the scene and kind of take that place. But yeah, I think it's mostly going to be small ship heavy. So now I also want to talk about the meta and how, because this is kind of a good branching point, how the meta is going to kind of change once we start playing more 200-point games. Now I don't. This isn't going to be. There's nothing that has indicated that this is going to be the standard moving forward for all tournaments and worlds. Pretty sure Armada is still going to be designed and distributed and made as as a full 400-point game. I think I said 800-point game a couple of times. But either way, if you're playing, the normal standard 400-point game, you will be fine because I think it's still going to stay that way. But in the 200-point format, which is going to be an alternate format, very similar to how you have X-Wing and they have X-Wing Epic, or at least used to have X-Wing Epic. It'll still be played. But I think in the 200-point format, we're going to see certain things that maybe, that shift in power. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some cards that are in the game right now that I think are going to be changing. I'm also going to talk about average builds. So let's talk about average builds first. I think your average build in a 200-point format is probably going to be around 3 ships and either 2 to 4 squadrons. So here I've got 3 hammerheads and 4 squadrons. And I gave one of them rogue, for rogue squadron. And then this way, these hammerheads can just take a squadron token first round, and then concentrate on movement and firing the rest of the game. And we can activate all of our, 4 squadrons would be a pretty heavy squadron presence, I think, for a 200-point format. And then here, 3 ships and 2 squadrons, a little bit more beefier ships, right? So it depends if you're going to go slim down ships or heavier ships, depending then. That's going to kind of give you room for squadrons. You may see a lot of builds that don't have any squadrons at all, but I think a good norm is going to be like 3 ships, 2 squadrons. Feels pretty standard for me because there's also going to be certain ships, certain slightly more expensive small ships that tend to be very, very popular. I think Demolisher will be very popular. I think Yavaris with 2 decent ships will be very popular. Like each side has its small ships titles that make them very, very strong. I'm hoping that there become other small ship titles, and of course this is kind of something we have to wait and see what comes with Rebellion in the Rim, because there may be a lot more titles that give new life to other ships and make them more of a threat in this format, and that is also very exciting. But also upgrades. I think you might see slave turrets get taken a little bit more. I don't see it taken very much in my local meta. And because it's got a pretty big drawback to it. You can't attack twice. Now, there's certain ships this works better on than others in a normal game. But in a 200-point game, you're going to go up against less ships. So the penalty of not being able to attack a second time is less severe because you're a lot less likely to have that second shot anyway. Especially once you destroy one ship, you might only have 1 ship left, right? If you're going up against maybe only a 2-ship list. So this doesn't seem like the drawback, I feel like, is less pronounced at a 200-point format. Gunnery Team is certainly going to be different. Now, I know this is counter to what I just said, but it depends on the ship. It depends on the ship. On certain ships, like if you go with a huge ship or medium ships, I think are more likely to want to take Gunnery Team a lot. But I think Gunnery Team is going to change. It might be taken a lot less because of like the small ships that will sometimes use it. But it also might be absolutely critical if you end up going with like a 1-ship build. If they do allow large ships, if you're running a Simoon, you're going to have Gunnery Team. Whereas sometimes it's an option, right? Although this one is already very, very popular. I think Gunnery Team will scale down a little bit though because I don't expect the large ships to come in. But I just think Gunnery Team is going to be impacted by this because when you have a different amount of ships on the board, that changes cards that cause you to look at your format and what impact your format has on the way that this card is going to work. I think Phylon Q7 Tractor Beams is another good example of a card that's going to be impacted by the format because I expect to see a lot of small ships. I think the 200-point format will be dominated by small ships, and when you have a lot of small ships, you can really slow down other small ships. Phylon Q7 isn't like the biggest, baddest thing ever, but it's very, very effective against those ships that want to come in and get close to you. It's something as simple as a flotilla can equip Phylon Q7 tractor beams and slow down an MC-30 that wants to get into black dice range. They can slow down a Demolisher that's trying to creep towards you. All right, they can slow down another flotilla that has slicer tools that's coming in and trying to stop your carrier from giving squadron commands. So it's very, very good because it's always going to work, and you can work on any ship, and it's going to have a huge impact. So I think Phylon Q7s could be a real making a comeback. It's possible. I don't think it'll be super strong, but I think it'll be viable at least. I think it will be viable. Adar Talon is somebody who's still good in the 400-point game in the full-size standard game, but I think his value is going to be relative to the amount of points of your list, and I think his value increases in a 200-point game. Let's just say you put him on an expensive squadron that's over 20 points, right? You're going to get a whole, effectively be able to double that squadron's activations. So when you activate, and you're going to get that great squadron that you're able to do again. And we haven't even seen all the new squadrons. So, there could be like a 30-point squadron out there that's just like wrecking everything. And then Adar Talon's going to let you activate that whole squadron again. Well, in the 400-point game, that might be, 5% of your list that is, or even more than 5% of your list that he's allowing you to use a second time. But in the 200-point format, that's 10% of your list, assuming like a 30-point squadron. And he costs 10, so you're getting like an extra 20 points for free, kind of, activating each turn. That's just kind of the way I'm looking at it. But like his impact is doubled in a smaller list. Now he's not as good. And conversely, if you had a 2,000-point format, and you used him on like Luke Skywalker. Well, you're getting like an extra 10, like Luke like 20, 21 points, 22 points, somewhere in that ballpark. You're getting like an extra 11, 12 points out of Adar Talon, which doesn't really feel as big of a deal in a 2,000-point game. But if you're in a 200-point game, it's all of a sudden it's a much, much bigger deal. So, cards that are really going to kind of have a more effectiveness in a 200-point format. Adar Talon is definitely one of them. And so there's going to be other cards like that. I'm not going to go through every single card, but I just think it's kind of cool to highlight some that I think might be a little bit more valuable when we get to a 200-point format. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. We're going to talk a little bit more about this once we finally get our preview and we find out some of the rules and the specifics about the 200-point format. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to a preview for Rebellion in the Rim. We're getting closer. We do expect Rebellion in the Rim to come out at Q3. That's when they've announced it, which does mean it could be a Gen Con early release. And we are in June right now, folks. Now, June does mean that we have less than 2 months until Gen Con. So I think it's about time for us to get a preview article. But we'll see. We'll see if they do it. We'll see if they don't. And, whatever happens, I'll be here to bring it to you. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, have a great day.